what we're going to do is we have 4 poets who are reading today. Each poet will be reading for about 15 minutes. I will introduce them one at a time as they read. And when they're all finished, we will open up the floor for questions and answer, for discussion, for whatever probably, hopefully kind thing you want to say to our wonderful poets today, whatever comments you want to make. So we will get going with our first reader today, who is going to be Linda Goodman Robiner. Linda hopes readers will find in her poetry, especially her new collection, Chrysalis, not only a memoir, but a door opening into their own lives. In addition to many poems published in journals and anthologies, some of her poems have led artists to create, musicians to compose, and a writer to include her poetry in a daily desk calendar. Linda's chapbook, Reverse Fairy Tale, traces the unraveling of a marriage. She developed and implemented an Artists in Schools program, produced programming for public television, taught at Northeastern Ohio colleges and universities, and has facilitated writing workshops. Please welcome Linda Goodman Robiner.
Hi, everybody. I'm delighted to be here with you today. Virtually is way better than not at all, and we don't have to wear masks. I hope we'll be all deeply connected. I'm looking forward to hearing the other readers as well. I'm going to start with reading at 11. I'm reading Gone with the Wind, propped up in bed with a couple of pillows. I skim the boring Civil War scenes, but when red carries scarlet up the stairs, my heart hammers in my skinny chest. I have no idea what the two of them will do in the bedroom, but I want to be there. Although my book, Chrysalis, was published in August, this is the first chance I've had to read from it. So I'm especially grateful to you, Georgia Court, and to Bookstore One for hosting, and thanks to all of you for watching this afternoon. The poems I've collected here, among many hundreds I've written, are about the arc of a life. I hope you feel, as Georgia mentioned, a reflection of your own experience in these poems or the life of someone you care about. Now I give you a life. Piano recital duet. We whispered when we opened the door of the First Baptist Church. Stained glass light, washed benches, dark wood in the sanctuary, splendid but airless. Mama had rouged my cheeks, beribboned my hair. Again and again, I straightened my ruffled socks, watching, waiting for our turn. Mothers and fathers tilted their bodies forward, tensed their shoulders. Jeff's chords blended with my higher notes. He is long dead, as I muse about 4 hands running up and down the keyboard that summer Sunday afternoon when all we knew was music. The next poem I'm going to read is The Rules. I know I'm an older woman and you might think I don't know about these things anymore, but I still do. The rules. Don't look at yours. Don't finger it. Don't think about it. Don't talk about it. For heaven's sakes, don't stroke it. Don't do it in the car. Don't enjoy it. And never do it with a writer unless you want to hear about it. And one for my sons, Larry and Stephen. I kneel to touch tiny palm prints in driveway cement. Saved his finger painting from the first day of preschool, a dance in blue and violet, walked him to kindergarten and a few blocks toward first grade. Every opening day afterward, watched, taking movies as he backed away, waving smaller and smaller in my lens. This next poem was written a long time ago when dress styles were way more restrained than they are now. It's called Dress with One Sleeve. I want to put it on again, the gauzy, blousy dress, one loose sleeve gathered at the wrist, the other naked. The dress whose long skirt draped easily over hips, whose blue looked like sky through sheer undulating curtains when you're making love late in the afternoon. Wearing it, I felt like a beatnik, a hippie, a flower child. I'd missed those lifetimes, had chosen castles on beaches with little children, three of us kneeling backwards on the couch, watching lightning in the valley. I want to replay that final scene, the evening I came down in the dress. Silver sandals slipped over bare feet, so the décolletage of my toes showed. My husband clenched his teeth, crossed his arms over his chest. If you wear that dress, I am not going to the party. The tone of his voice was the way people talk to children sometimes, as though they know who the children are, what they need, as though longing and hunger signify nothing. I went upstairs and changed my clothes. But now I want to put on the dress with one sleeve, be the woman I am today, and say what I need to say. The next poem is about my brother Jeff, who died in his 40s. I've written a lot of poems about Jeff, but I just chose this one for now. Deception. Jeff in hospital pajamas. My struggle to grasp what he wanted to say. He could utter garbled sounds, but his language seemed foreign. Helpless before his hollow-cheeked longing, I drew letters on a poster board, invited him to point, but he had no authority over his arms. I listened carefully, ached to know his words, to open to his humanity, to be with him in his desperate days of dying. I nodded each time he told me something, as though I'd understood him. But every flutter of my head was a lie. I'm sure you've all had losses that are meaningful to you. My brother's death was pivotal in my life. It was the first time I really understood in a deep way that I too was going to die. Later, I saw this video called Bette Midler. The poem is called Bette Midler at the Continental Baths. I can scarcely breathe as I watch the grainy 1971 video. Feel I'm in the room watching Bette Midler's 80th performance at the Continental Baths. Maybe Jeffrey was there that night with his friends. He told me he liked her. He may have reveled in another night of Bette's lusty singing. Barry Manilow at the piano. I wonder how my brother felt in his teens and 20s when he brought a girl to dinner, so the sheen and swish of her skirt might camouflage his longing. I wish he had told me more about his struggle to hide, his struggle to live. I wish I had asked. During his 30s, his life must have been a festival. New York City, the baths, Fire Island, until his friends began to die, one by fucking one. And now I'm going to read some love poems. Rain when it comes. Having grown up without excess, I crave it and find it in the jungle of my garden, where scarlet hollyhocks line up to flash their skirts, dancers at the Folie Bergère. An alien burst their skin like the 4th of July. Had flowers at our marital home flourished like these, I might not have been able to leave. I did go back to the house to smell lilies of the valley, pick Japanese iris the week they were in bloom. Life is a garden, extravagant, generous, brimming with beauty when tended. When you're in love, you relish rain when it comes, the atmosphere of release. And some days you nearly drown. Another love poem. The title is the same as the first line, which is, that first kiss was innocent, but you came back for 2 more, light and quick as white moths. 3 kisses, chaste, but for the hunger they unleashed in me, the leaning toward, leaves turning their undersides up on a hot day to catch benevolent wind, the sound of distant thunder that makes a cherry tree dream of rain. Middle-aged lust. The truth is, middle age had come and gone. I thought I had sealed myself off from longing. I might have missed late lust had I said, no thanks, when you asked, have a cup of coffee with me someday? You walked me home from Arabica on a September evening that felt like spring. An odd companion for a woman in her 60s, a man with a son in high school. I'd been married to one man since college, though since divorced. After we finished dinner that first night I cooked for you, you stood to do the dishes. That gesture released everything congealed in me. You rubbed each glass and paint and plate patiently between your fingers, patiently between your sudsy fingers. Before I read my last poem, let me tell you that you may buy Chrysalis from me directly, or if you're in Cleveland, you can buy it from Max Packs, and it's also available on Amazon. It's so nice to see all of you. The last poem is called When You Hear I've Croaked, and that's also the first line. When you hear I've croaked, come over and straighten my dresser drawers, Marcia. I don't want to be embarrassed by the muddle. Oh, never mind, I'll be gone. And take Marty out for tumblers of vodka. You may be surprised. by the wattage of his weeping. His mother wanted her hair done before she was lowered into the rest of her days. No bouffant, no tease for me. I'll be gone. The final flames will burn briskly without styling gel. My death will be fertile soil for my family and friends to share stories, laugh together. Longtime poet pals promise new work for the occasion. They can trash my poetry, all story and sentiment, so little restraint. I won't mind. I'll be gone. What I want is for those I care about to see themselves in a magical landscape. You too, my darling friend, still alive in the world. And to all of you, still alive in this magical world.
Thank you, Linda. That was beautiful. Our next reader is Robin Rappaport. Robin is a Holocaust survivor, and he was born in Głębokie, Poland. An Army veteran, he served a tour of duty with the 101st Airborne Division in Vietnam and also served in Germany. He spent more than 3 decades as a high school English teacher and served as president of the National Education Association of New York from 2003 to 2007. A member of the Ringling Poets Group, Robin has had his poetry published in the English Journal, Two River View, Radar Poetry, and others. He belongs to the Sarasota Jazz Club, loves jazz, and writes about it often. Also, among the subjects of his poetry are his experiences in Vietnam and the classroom, family dynamics, and the indignities of old age. Robin, I'll ask you to unmute and welcome Robin Rappaport.
Okay, Georgia, yes, give me a
Yes,
thumbs up. Okay,
yes,
thank you.
here you are.
All right, hello, folks. If something's going to happen at the right time, this was it. As I had everything set up on my desktop, it crashed, and I had to go back and set up on my laptop. You're all a little smaller, but you're large before me, I guess. Uh, the poems I've selected to read to you are generally poems that were launched by an experience, a particular moment in my life. The first poem I'll read is called Loon. It was born out of, for one thing, my love of jazz, and particularly Freddie Hubbard, the trumpeter, and an experience in 1972 at the Newport Jazz Festival. He was about to go on stage with his group, and that song was among their repertoire, when the unruly crowd outside the place, today I think it was Antifa, the unruly crowd crashed the fence, and the concert, that performance and the entire concert was canceled, much to my chagrin and the chagrin of thousands of other people. Jump many years later to the shores of Lake George. I had a habit of getting up early in the morning and sitting out up by the dock, listening to my jazz. On one occasion, when I was listening to the jazz, a loon landed literally 20 feet away from me and gradually came closer. And that same loon, I believe, came back day after day for a number of days. This is the poem that was born out of that experience. It is called Loon. It has an epigram from Percy Bysshe Shelley. It says, music, when soft voices die, vibrates in the memory. The poem. Freddie Hubbard's first light drifts across the water in the small hour of this tiny, misty morning on Lake George. The same loon lands, breaking the sunrise. I am certain of it. He is the same loon. What compass, what cycle of place and legacy returns this solitary traveler to this very spot on Northwest Bay at this time of slow unwinding of the strict rhythms of summer? More than trillium or trout lily draws him to this moment of magic when all is quiet and the water, still iridescent in the morning light, reflects the autumn turn of color. His landing, the usual flapping and preening, settles into a graceful glide of black velvet plumes, speckled white, and that shimmering pearl neckband. Dressed for the occasion, yet always alone, he calls in response to my romance. With this enchanted place, his shrill staccato yodel settles into a slow hoot, a softer call, haunting, like a spirit passing by. Is he seeking or remembering his mate, calling to her or to me in sympathy? Does he miss her most of all? His primordial song transports me to vanished shores, to lost worlds unknown, to where his cry began. Does he feel the jazz? Does the music transcend the sound that carries the haunting serenade to the farthest shore, to a place, a dreamscape, where we close our ears to see the jazz, where we receive the sound? Here is an insufficient verb. Does it take us to a journey, moment to moment, hand and wing, to a musical memory of yesterday's dreams recalled through the prism of wishful thinking? He floats, motionless. Time has stopped. It hovers. Aside from the music, a deep quiet embraces us. He glides closer, red eyes wide, clear, unblinking, deep knowing of our secret sharing of this music, this place, while I swallow my lunatic glee at our silent communion. Then our reverie is routed by the percussion of frogs brushing washboards. Ribbit, ribbit, bit, bit, ribbit, ribbit, ribbit. Discord in 5/4 jazzy signatures. The loon dives deep without a ripple, without a sound, beyond the reach of sunlight. Soon he resurfaces, so close I hear his breath or sigh. He looks at me, and then silently he dives again, and he is gone. Our moments spent, the lake empty of loon song. That night, a single long drawn mournful note, a wail of the wilderness, breaks the silence. I know it is my loon. The full moon is in his voice. A farewell. The quiet that follows becomes deeper than before. Um, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Providence, Rhode Island, or cities like it. Um, my family moved initially from Europe to Canada and then to Providence, where my mother had family. And when you went to high school in Providence, everybody went on the same public transportation. We had passes. So you got your education really was on the bus more so than the classroom in some ways, because you got to mingle with kids you would otherwise not have an opportunity to spend any time with. This is a poem born out of one of those, a collection of those experiences. It's called Confessional Tale. Providence, Rhode Island. The public bus to high schools was my cradle of initiation. My dear and old friend, the late John O'Brien, was my guide into the mysteries of the Goyish world. At Sacred Heart, if you said you did it, the priest shouted aloud, and people twisted in their pews to see who left the little black booth. Once at Our Lady of Mercy, Father Brady dragged Michael Kennedy into the aisle and told him never to come back. And they wondered if Mike had confessed to a new grip or if Father had caught him at it then and there. The priests raved on, drunk with fury. Nothing fell off but their faith. Still, to disobey is painful. They turned serious and pale and spoke only among themselves, and their mothers wept. Then Eddie Graham saved their souls. Go to St. Mary's, he said one day. The priests there have heard everything. They went, and it was true. God forgave them, and they took the sacrament again. John grew up to be a fine man and a skeptic. He had a lovely wife. My next poem is born out of a collection of experiences on Kangwa Street in Saigon. Kangwa Street, to my dismay, I suppose, is the center of the red light district. And this is a poem about that area. Kangwa Street. Music divides the evening. Wrong song, wrong time, wrong place. The staff sergeant closes his eyes and can see men drawing lines in the dust. America pushes through the membrane of mist and smoke. And he's a small boy again in Bogalusa. White only signs and Hank Snow telling him he's born to lose. But tonight he walks into a place where bar girls fade like tropical birds, where he orders the beer. When he orders a beer, the mama-san behind the counter acts as if she can't understand, while her eyes skirt each white face as Hank Williams, so lonesome he could cry, calls from the psychedelic jukebox. They have been brothers where only machine gun fire brings them together. Down the street, black GIs also hold to their turf. Sam Cooke sends them some loving there, and Wilson Pickett takes a little love in the mid-lane hour. An off-limits sign pulls him deeper into the alleys, and he looks for a softness behind these voices, wounded by their beauty and war. Back in the bush at Dakto and Quezon, we fought the brothers of these women. We now run to hold in our arms. There's more than a nation inside us, as black and white soldiers touch the same lovers, minutes apart, tasting each other's breath or come, without knowing these rooms run into each other like tunnels, leading to the underworld. Um, this next poem is born out of an experience many, 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 many years ago. I don't know if any of you have ever been to the Stratford, Ontario Shakespeare Festival. Most of the plays that are performed are Shakespearean, but there are also some other current plays. When I was there, one of the plays that was presented was a play called Gin Game that starred Hume Cronin and Jessica Tandy, who were husband and wife. And it was just a brilliant, brilliant performance. But it, in some respects, shook me to my core because it reminded me, in many respects, of my parents. And in some respects, my parents' household was more toxic than the play was. Anyway, this is a poem born out of that. It's called Gin Game, and it's written in kind of a Greek tragic structure. You have to see the poem, but I'll try to read it in a way that comes across. Gin Game. The light was always thin, as if to keep the truth at bay, that they had used each other up, that they no longer liked each other, maybe never did. After the evening's ritual fray, I watched them at safe distance from harm's way. They seemed to shrink despite the smallness of the dim Formica room. But then I think the memory's brittle fabric will not ever yellow, though I blink at tears I never dare to show. We children were an audience cast in silent shadow, watching wide-eyed from the ragged edges of the game they played against the sallow whiteness of the room. An eerie stillness came, as sudden as the storm. A calm air settled after the thud and rattle of his chair against the trembling table that served as altar for this jarring rite, the endless fight from which we hid beneath his temple, beneath his temple's reddish graying hair. An artery began to throb. It pulled and pulsed until the eyelid twitched. It was a sign, he sometimes joked, that he would die of stroke. He did. The rage was gone. His eyes lost focus. He forgot the battle and the venting of the spleen and the hard fact that he had also called her bitch. That's it, enough. You're making me crazy. Let's play some cards. Her opaque eyes never left him, though they seemed to have long bereft him as she reached behind into the candle drawer for the plastic laminated deck. She dropped them on the table, a votive of the same dull indifference as her dutifully hollow lighting of the Sabbath lights. You deal. In weary mime rehearsed through all the comings and the goings of their life, they shuffled, turn by turns in desperate silence, and dealt each other losing hands. She folded like their empty years together. That's it. Cards, an ugly mess. It's useless. This has no rhyme, no reasonable promise of a meld. I quit. There was no wife nor woman in her voice. His passion spent on petty quips. He muttered merely, "Yeah, you never could play gin. You never knew what to keep or throw away." He then began a game without her, like on his angry picnics in the yard, and chewed on gravel, mumbled unspeakable words that tumbled hard against his lips. He claimed he hated solitaire, but played it often during evenings of despair till the tinsel gloom would soften. And though he always swore not to repeat it, in the thin light, when he was sure he wasn't looking, he often cheated.
Robin, I think we'd have time for one more short one.
A short one, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I pulled long ones all over the place. All right, this is a short one. Um, it's interesting. Uh, it's a short one that reflects how short we become with one another as we get older and we lose patience with ourselves and push it on to the other person, and relationships become more difficult at 80 than they were at 20. I never thought that would be the case. At any rate, it's called Wrong Number. In the most simple conversation, we dance like the box step, the stiff foxtrot at a junior high school social, and never quite know who's leading or who stepped on whose toes first. You don't let me finish what I'm saying by saying you know what I'm going to say. So I'm redundant in preamble, stubborn in repeating my endless beginnings. Stymied for an instant mute, I scream at you, over you, past you who have not understood my silence. I know you will not understand my words. Now you're insignificant, other. I know you believe you understand what you think I shouted, but the meanness you heard was not what I meant.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you very much. Uh, our next reader is Linda Albert. Linda is an internationally published poet, essayist, and former theater director. She's also a certified Jungian archetypal pattern analyst and communication coach with a master's certification in neurolinguistics. Linda's poetry is influenced by her interest and academic training in those areas, as well as by the values of her faith tradition, the changing roles of contemporary women, and her personal joys, struggles, and insights. Author of Charting the Lost Continent, Poetry, and Other Discoveries, her awards include the Olivet and Dyer Ives Foundation Poetry Prizes and the Atlanta Review's International Merit Award for Poetry. Please welcome Linda Albert.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. Very much appreciate Georgia Court and what you do for us for as poets and for the community and the way you support all writers. I'm going to take a risk and start with a poem that I wasn't even sure if I was going to include. This is not a poem that has ever won an award, but it's a poem that tickles me, and maybe it'll give us a change of pace because you've heard so many wonderful poems, and you're going to hopefully hear some more that you think are truly good poems. But this is, as I say, a change of pace called, oh God, I hope I remembered it. I maybe didn't, even though no, I didn't include it. Yes, I did. It's called Belated Gifts, after Mary Oliver and Billy Collins, who are two of my favorite poets. I longed to write a poem like Mary Oliver and Billy Collins, to find a sensibility that puts me into their exalted league. But what did I do to deserve this? Did I once lie on my back and study the sky for wild geese returning to announce how I fit into the family of things? Did I come back from a walk in the woods to a wooden desk lit by a window and dash off a clever elegy to a poem in my head, but forgotten? No, the only journey I took this day was to Sam's Club, where I communed with the wares. I brought home a mammoth bag, a box of trash bags, a giant container of dishwasher tabs, and a vest 3-berry pie. Along with a pair of plump rotisserie chickens, which I proceeded to cut up and doctor with barbecue sauce so I can whip them out later and present as my own, just for the fun. I pick mostly, when I'm lucky enough to do a reading, the poems call me as much as I choose them. And the poems this time seem to want to be heard that have more to do with this last year or so, when we've had the time to become more contemplative, whether we wanted to or not. And hopefully they will speak to you as well as they have to me. In this last year, I've lost my beloved partner of 8 years, and my hair turned white. This is a poem having to do with this kind of thing, my hair. Objects closer than they appear. I'm lying on my side, curled in a shell, in a spiral, like the shell my grandchildren found at the beach, happily reading, an occupation more satisfying than sex some days, when I spy a limb wrinkled as old fruit, or a sheet left too long in the dryer. At first, I can't believe this belongs to me. I contract my muscles to prove mistaken identity, but see, it's my hand holding the book, my hand with rivers starting to look like tributaries of rivers, fingers growing arthritic knobs. The skin on my arm pleats like an accordion at certain angles. If I could, I would tear this betrayal off, throw it in the trash like sagging nylons, put on a pair with fresh elastic. I have seen how this happens to others, how epidermis stretches while structure melts, how even exercise doesn't hold collapse at bay. But I am still in the mental mourning of life. I'm not ready to wear this ancient suiting. Whose arm is this anyway? A certain joy. A certain joy has passed my way. A certain joy has passed. I knew, of course, it could not stay. If joy, it could not last. It was a momentary gift, a tantalizing elf who gave my soul a sudden lift, then disappeared inside itself. Go on and mock me, impish one. I know your tricks. I'll play your game and pause beneath this winter sun to weep because I've learned your name. Yes, I will chant a miralogue, a Greek morning song, a miralogue for all the shifting grains of sand. And when I'm done, if there's still fog, I'll whistle till you find my hand. A certain joy has passed my way. A certain joy has passed. I'd always known it could not stay. If joy, it could not last. It was a momentary gift, that tantalizing elf who gave my soul a sudden lift and left a memory of itself, who gave my soul a sudden lift and left me larger than myself. This poem, I'd like to hope, speaks for way more than my own little life and my own little world and the bubble that I wanted to believe made me connected with the rest of humanity, but in this last year has helped me to realize I've been very out of touch with what it must be like to be other people. But I think I dedicate it not just for my life, but I think for all human lives. Here are the sick parts coming up for healing. Here are the sick parts coming up for healing. See there, the tired one, the abused one, the one whose head aches so. See them shuffling, the sad, despairing, hopeless one, the angry one, the one nobody loves, dragging, undernourished, like prisoners from Dachau. She will not push them away. This could be he just as well as she. Medicate them, stuff them full of food or work or entertainment, run from them, lock them in the booby hatch. Poor, suffering embryos of soul. She will make them convalescent space in the garden, in the backyard where a mole has traced an underground river in her grass, where buds are ready to burst into bloom on every tree and bush, where air is filled again with bird song. She will feed them dry, toasted English muffins, sun and sympathy to soothe their starved and anxious stomachs. Walk softly so they won't be startled. Bring them tea and Afghans. Apologize for all the years she shamed them. Those long, unbroken years of winter would have been enough to bear. She will touch them gently. Their bones are thin and brittle, locked so long in cellars and in chains, they can only take in tiny sips of love. They are weak. They lie there on lounge chairs in the patio. All they can do is breathe right now, is breathe right now. And even that is hard. To Wild Women, in honor of Clarissa Pinkola Estes, Natalie Goldberg, and all who helped the hands grow back. Cast out of the kingdom to find the second half of life, lost and confused, the light covered over by clouds, wanting a tree to lean on, but none in sight is big enough to hold her. Too tired to wander further, she lies down on the forest floor to rest. Dead branches, dirt, and moss. The rich scent fills her nostrils. Decaying leaves beneath, she joins the compost. Tendrils of things still living curl around her. Rains nourish. Small shoots emerge from spaces between her toes and fingers, belly button, underarms, along her groin and scalp. She begins to take root. Sun warms, leaves cover, snow protects, spring again, then summer, fall, winter comes. The cycle is repeated. Growing into earth takes time. Each spring, the roots grow deeper. Finally, green buds appear on tongue and eyelids, edges of her inner ear. Whisper to her of the promise. Witness that it will be kept. In her treeness, she will flower. This time, there is no doubt. Soil is proper, seed willing, seasons honored, roots are home. And this is my last. I think this is the time for my last, Georgia. Have two, I can do two or one.
You could do two short ones or one that might be a little longer. So your choice.
Well, it's 2 pages, so I'll do changing shapes. I'm not so interested these days in shape as I am in shapelessness and flow. What good does it do to change from square to circle or triangle to polygon or helix when what is called for is letting go? I think it's best to be like water, to be not just the ocean, but to know the tide and current as supplicant and lover. I'm not so interested in hanging on to any shape when the challenge is to learn to flow, to be the wave that cascades or laps or crashes without protest against a hostile or a foreign, or with luck, a gentle shore. There is punishment in clinging, not God's, but just because it goes against the order of things. I know that, but I do it anyway. Imitating the ocean is presumption. Still, I haven't given up hope of turning into stream or river when I remember in the nick of time to save myself from drowning by refusing to shift back into an old, discarded shape.
Well, thank you, Linda. That was lovely. Our last reader for the day before we go to open discussion is Mike Kozabek. After retiring from practicing law, Mike now spends more time writing poems. He has published over 150 haiku, tanka, and haibun in many anthologies and was awarded second prize in the international section of the 2018 Mainichi Haiku Contest in Japan. His verse has appeared in Icon, Journal of Modern Poetry, Frog Pond, Modern Haiku, and other publications. Please welcome Mike Kozabek.
Father, the drunken man pounds the door and stumbles through the threshold of his castle, a slobbering bear returning to the lair. After foraging for drink and scouring for a fight,
upset and angry with them. I think I laughed.
his feet are sharp and bared, his head scarred and bloody. With his fists clenched, his neck veins bulge. He shouts whore and fuck at his faithful wife while hiding his dark secrets. His young son trembles in bed, fearful of stiff blows. He holds back tears. How long must this clamor continue? God have mercy, Christ have mercy, before silence and sleep return. Hiding from what could not be hidden. Next morning, the boy is drowsy, but dutifully trudges to school as the man had risen hours earlier for his job. The family locked in an addictive and tiresome dance. 2. With alcohol streaming again through his veins, father thumps the window of the departing bus, carrying the boy and his team, reaching out as he could not, sober. The boy shirks, slides down in his seat and shields his face from his father's darting eyes, craving love, but shackled with shame. He settles for indifference, hiding from what could not be hidden. The next morning, father stands a sober sentry at the front yard fence with beckoning smile and glittering eyes, greeting passing neighbors and strangers. Good day, Mrs. Bayberry. Jimmy's in 5th grade now? Smart boy, takes after you. 4. The man who, years later, rides a creaky, musty bus through small dusty towns to visit his soldier son and relive the years he trudged through the trenched mud of Europe when dictators raged, but also to connect. Now is tamed there to sob and embrace his son, revealing that which had so long been hidden. Now a shorter poem, same boy, different view. Air boy. In sweat-soaked t-shirts, I have dunked baskets, floated three-pointers from beyond the arc. I've grunted, pouted, and sweated through picks, crossovers, and behind the back dribble drills. In my nostrils still is the steam of showers, cleansing the stale locker room stench. Buff gym floors, sacred to some, may shine, but I've cherished more my days on worn wooden boards than outdoor asphalt, where lanky boys dribble, bump, and jostle before airing the orange leather through a netless hoop. Still, my fondest memory remains of the toddler, I, clutching a ball with eyes bright, staring up at the rim, trusting my father to lift me high, to heave the huge sphere up, with spirit soaring. Bookstore One remains such an asset in the community through the commitment of Georgia Court and staff. So thank you, Georgia, for continuing this valuable place and hosting events such as this, along with a variety of book groups, writing classes, and other opportunities for readers. We look forward to events again at the store, perhaps even another haiku class. So turning now to haiku and Senryu, Senryu, both short verse. As haiku relates to nature, Senryu does to human natures. Don't expect 575, but since each is short, we tend to say them twice. See a shift, a change in the final word or words in these. Roads draped in ice, the winter she slipped away. Roads draped in ice, the winter she slipped away. Under the stars, the cold bites my lungs, inhaling constellations. Under the stars, the cold bites my lungs, inhaling constellations. On the sill, a day's fly buzzes, winter recess. On the sill, a day's fly buzzes, winter recess. ALS, the doctor says, at each bend of the river, another bend ahead. ALS, the doctor says, at each bend of the river, another bend ahead. At her bedside, the tight skein unravels. At her bedside, the tight skein unravels. Amid the stones of the soldiers' cemetery, Edelweiss. Amid the stones of the soldiers' cemetery, Edelweiss. In some of these verses, the second line can act as a pivot, working with either the first line or the third line alone. So spring training, for example, spring training, ball players stretch their winter escapades. So spring training, ball players stretch, or ball players stretch their winter escapades. Here's the pivot in this Senryu. Old hat, I misplace my sense of wonder. Old hat, I misplace my sense of wonder. The verse can even exist in even shorter length, despite the chill trillium, despite the chill trillium, despite the frost forsythia, despite the frost forsythia. Genealogy tree, some buzzards perch. Genealogy tree, some buzzards perch. Conflicting ideas can clash, but also come together in a new whole in this verse. So, one day at a time, lottery ticket. One day at a time, lottery ticket. Or reveal the mind of those described. The hall, suddenly empty, slow dance. The hall, suddenly empty, slow dance. With that, I'll saunter out the hill. With that, I'll saunter out the hall. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Mike. At this point, this has been a terrific reading. All of our poets they've all been different from each other and all wonderful. So, you're welcome to unmute or wave your hands to thank our poets, or to show that, or to use your clapping function or whatever. But thank you so much for your reading. And at this point, I would like to open it for questions, comments, something that anyone wants to say. You could simply unmute yourself and make yourself known, or you could use the raise your hand function, and I'll see you on the screen. I mean, you could raise your physical hand, or there's a hand function. Yeah, so Robin Rappaport.
Just a brief comment. I was neglectful at the beginning in saying my thanks to you for this wonderful service that you do. This pandemic has raised hell for all of our lives. Aside from missing my grandchildren, your events at the bookstore rank very high among the things that I miss. And this is my first relatively successful attempt at going on Zoom. It's not quite the same, but still it's an opportunity to share and to hear other people and to see a lot of faces that I've seen at your events. So Georgia, thank you very much.
My pleasure, believe me. Others, I see Joel has his hand up.
Yes, I want to thank you, as everyone does. Needless to say, you are, an institution. And all the poets, you each offered something different, something that deeply resonated, from experiences with your brother at the baths. My brother and your brother were probably there at the exact same time, to the red light district in Wall Street after Vietnam, and to the lighthearted poems about lost in love. So it was all exactly perfect today. I just thank you all for sharing your work, and Georgia for giving us this venue to hear it.
Thank you all for coming. Yeah, other comments, questions for the poets, anything you'd like to say? I see Linda Albert has her hand up. Yeah.
I don't know if this is okay to say, so you can tell me if it's not. Can I mention my book and ask you whether it can be ordered through your bookstore, which I think it can, because
we have it.
Yeah. Oh, there's Doug. He knows. He says we have it.
It's on the shelf, Linda.
All right. So in case anybody is interested in my book, which just came out a year ago, I was lucky to be able to read for Georgia, and then the COVID hit, and that was sort of the end of being able to do anything with one's new book. But this is my collection, and it is at bookstore. It's available at Bookstore One, which would be wonderful because we want to support our independent bookstore. So if you're interested, Charting the Lost Continent, Poetry and Other Discoveries by Linda Albert. And thank you so much, all of you, for being here. It means so much.
Yes, thank you. And other comments. And if any of you are interested in seeing what's in the chat, you have a chat icon, and you can look to see what people are putting in the chat. The reason I haven't mentioned it is because they've been comments. There haven't been any questions there, but you might be interested in them. Anyone? Joel, I see your hand up.
I just wanted to say that for me, Zoom during COVID has improved my experiences, because when I go to the poetry readings at the book club, I'm in, I have a tendency to sit in the back. And when you're on Zoom and you put it on speaker view, you're looking right at the poet as they're performing their work. And it just feels so much more intimate. The hand gestures, the face, the micro motions. I'm just enjoying it tremendously.
Thank you for saying that, Joel. That feels like my experience also, being someone who has moderated not only a lot of poetry readings, but a lot of author events over the past year. I'm kind of loving Zoom, actually. Yeah. Other comments or questions or thoughts? No, I can see lots of faces out there, but I don't see anyone with a hand raised or looking like you'd like to ask a question. So with that, I'll say thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. And thank you to all of our poets. Let's give them one last round of applause. Been a terrific poetry reading.
Fantastic.
I agree, Doug. Fantastic. And I want to remind you again about the March 11th reading, which is the Channeling Amanda Gorman reading, which will feature the Dragonfly Cafe kids from Booker Middle School, but perhaps more relevant to this group. Richard Blanco will be reading Rick Hillis and Jim Daniels. So go on site at our bookstore, sarasotabooks.com, and you'll find a pretty easy place under events to get an RSVP for that, and it's a free event. So thank you for coming. Bye.
Bye-bye.